Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Spotlight on ET Now, and I'm Alex Matthew. Probably one of the most important catalysts for the progress of human history in the 20th century, as far as technology is concerned, is the semiconductor. It is ubiquitous today. It's in our cars, it's in our cell phones, computers, televisions, even our washing machines. And a shortage of semiconductors that began last year is a problem that manufacturers of all of those items are currently contending with. What caused that shortage? Why can't it be fixed quickly? And why isn't India a major part of the semiconductor industry? We attempt to answer all of those questions. But first, the most important question, what is a semiconductor and why is it so important? To understand the global semiconductor shortage, one must appreciate the complex nature of semiconductors. A running inside joke in the semiconductor industry is that it's not rocket science, it's much more difficult. A semiconductor is essentially the brain that powers your electronic device. The more complicated the function of the device, the more advanced the circuitry of the semiconductor. To put things in context, Intel's first microprocessor, released in 1971, had 2,300 transistors. Apple's A14 chip, which powers its latest smartphones, contains 11.8 billion transistors. And last year, a UK-based company said it had developed a chip for use in artificial intelligence that has nearly 60 billion transistors. Each of those is a fraction of the size of a microorganism. What's more, chips consist of as many as 100 layers of materials. These layers are sometimes as thin as an atom and sit on top of each other to form a three-dimensional structure that connects the transistors. Computers can perform almost miraculous acts, but they only understand a language that consists of zeros and ones. That's called binary code. The transistors in semiconductors work as switches, each of which can be turned on or off individually. And since they can be in two different states, they can store two different numbers, 1 and 0. The more the number of transistors, the more complicated instructions a device can follow. It is estimated that there are over 100 billion integrated circuits in daily use around the world. That's more than the number of stars in our corner of the Milky Way galaxy. The semiconductor industry is dominated by large, highly specialized companies. The more complex chips that are used in computers, smartphones, cars, and aircraft are manufactured by two types of companies. Some, like Intel, both design and manufacture their own chips and are called integrated device manufacturers. Others, like Taiwan's TSMC, are foundries that specialize in manufacturing chips as per the blueprints provided by other companies. The manufacturing of an advanced semiconductor chip requires billions of dollars of investment, a large amount of land, uninterrupted power supply, fresh water, and skilled labor. It also involves huge amounts of money spent on innovation and research and development on an ongoing basis. And with technology continuing to advance exponentially, success or failure is usually determined by microscopic margins. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic was the start of the perfect storm for the semiconductor industry. Several buyers of semiconductors, particularly automotive companies, have traditionally followed just-in-time principles of supply chain management. Many of them slashed orders from suppliers, anticipating a sharp fall in demand. Meanwhile, with the requirement of work from home, sales of electronic goods like laptop computers, tablets, and smartphones went up dramatically. And the semiconductor industry began using the capacity vacated by the auto industry to cater to demand from other quarters. Lead times in the semiconductor business are often 3 to 4 months long, and that has meant that companies that did not have inventory of semiconductors have had to wait longer durations to have their orders fulfilled. Supply-side disruptions in the form of the Suez Canal block, a massive snowstorm in Texas, and drought in Taiwan have only exacerbated the shortage. Chip makers, meanwhile, are wary of setting up additional capacity because of the prohibitive cost and the long gestation periods involved. What's more, geopolitical tensions, particularly in the form of the dispute between the US and China, and tensions in the South China Sea with Taiwan, are adding more stakes to the race for semiconductor supremacy. In this scenario, the chip shortage could well extend into next year, especially if there are additional disruptions in the form of a resurgence of the pandemic. And manufacturers might have to pay more to get to the front of the waiting list. For ET Now, this is Alex Matthew. Now, some industries have been hit harder than others by this semiconductor shortage. On a lighter note, gamers in India have been quite disappointed that they haven't been able to get their hands on the PlayStation 5 that was launched by Sony in November of last year globally, but has been in short supply here in India. But perhaps the biggest impact has been faced by the automotive industry. Companies like Volkswagen and Jaguar Land Rover have announced that the shortage is affecting sales. Here's what the JLR CFO said on a call not too long back.
Reasons that I've already said. The Japanese issue is getting resolved, albeit slower than everybody would wish, and the issues in Texas are getting resolved, albeit slower than everybody would wish to do so. When we actually announced in May, those Q2 shortages from those sources were not known to us. We were working to the planned schedule that we originally had, and the reality is bringing production back on board has been more difficult. Not only will we suffer from that, others will suffer from that as well. So as I've mentioned, we don't know what others will communicate and say, but there will be some impact from some others depending on where they source their semiconductors from. The quarter 2 cash position is much worse than we were expecting in quarter 2. Why? Because the wholesales are up to 50% lower than we're expecting. How much that impacts the full year will totally depend on the speed of build in the second half of the year. There will be a dramatic rebound once we start building towards normal levels. Let me take you back to last year. Last year, we lost 1.6 billion cash in the first 3 months, and we generated 1.8 billion in the following 9 months to give us the best cash performance for 5 years. Clearly, if you measure on a fiscal year basis, the full impact of this may not have actually transpired, i.e. the full reversal of Q2. But that reversal will happen at the point we can now actually build back. And it may be we end up with one of the best quarter ones we've had for 7-8 years. I don't know yet. It really depends speed of reproduction. But once we're able to build cars, the reversal of these issues will happen very quickly.
But not all car companies have been equally impacted. Quite a few automakers here in India have not been hit very hard because they have inventories. For example, Mahindra and Mahindra says that it's not completely out of the woods, but it isn't badly hit either. Listen in.
As we grow further over the next few months, we may see some disruption coming in, but we don't expect something significant at this point in time. But the world has changed. We have to look at supply chains very differently than what we did before. And that's part of what we need to do over the next few months. We are comfortable overall, but not to a point where we feel that the problem is behind us. We still see this impacting some potential numbers. At this point in time, it's reasonably fine. But with the new launches and with the growth that will come in, it may impact some numbers if we don't get adequate supplies. So we're working with our suppliers right now. At this time, we don't see any potential crisis, but we don't see ourselves completely out of the woods as yet.
Moving beyond the automotive sector though, how big of an impact has it been on India as a whole? And why can't India create its own capability of manufacturing semiconductors? I'm joined now by K. Krishnamurthy, the President and Chief Executive Officer of India Electronics and Semiconductors Association. Thank you so much, Mr. Krishnamurthy, for taking the time. I want to start by asking you, how dependent is India at present on imports of semiconductors, and are there any numbers that you can give us to put things in context?
Well, thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me on this program. Yes, India's dependency on import of semiconductors is quite high. I would say when it comes to active semiconductors, active components in a system, our dependency probably will be as high as 90%. Okay, and if you take just one single product, the cell phones, which all of us are familiar with, last year, 2020-21, the Indian sales of cell phones is approximately $32 billion, out of which the semiconductor value will be somewhere in the range of $10 billion. So that gives you a ballpark estimate of just one product cell phone, how much do we import? Our import dependency on semiconductors is quite heavy.
Now, Mr. Krishnamurthy, we've established that semiconductors are ubiquitous and quite a few sectors have been impacted, but what is the overall impact on India?
Oh yes, the semiconductors and electronics have become all pervasive today, not only automotive or products that we use in TVs and things like that, but take the toys today. Go to the kitchen, go to the washrooms, go to your bedroom where you have brushless fans, etc. Every single thing that you touch today has a piece of electronics sitting on it. So that being said, the impact in India as far as the shortage is concerned also is equally big. So if you take, for example, one manufacturing line, which depends, let's say it's a tier 1 company who's catering to consumer electronics products, or it's a tier 1 company who's catering to IT infrastructure like the laptops and all that, probably they are impacted as much as 25%, because the global shortage itself is 25%. So there's no reason why it will be any less as far as India is concerned. It could be even more. Some cases maybe 30-40%. But the bottom line impact in percentage terms is at least 25% impact.
It's great that you put that in context. Now, it brings me to my next question, which is why can't India have its own capability? And in the conversations that I've had putting the show together, a lot of people have said that this has been in the works for so long. Numerous conversations have been had with numerous governments since the early 2000s to set up capability of semiconductors. It's a highly specialized industry, but can India at some point have its own capability?
Oh, yes, Alex. I think this has presented us with that opportunity. The current crisis situation has presented us with that opportunity. So let me elaborate this a little more. It is not that India doesn't have a fabrication capability. I mean, 25 years back, Bharat Electronics had its own semiconductor manufacturing capabilities. Of course, it was more for discrete electronic components, and they were more on bipolar technology and some amount of rudimentary CMOS technology. But that existed, and I think some of it still exists even today. Then we have a semiconductor fabrication capability in SCL Chandigarh, which today is at least running at 180 nanometer technology, if not smaller geometries. So the basic capability does exist, but it has not grown or caught up with the technologies that are required today by modern systems. So that is one part of the problem that we have to look at. And the government of India is definitely, this time around, at least I would say, is working overtime to make up for the lost time. There are multiple initiatives that are going on. There have been discussions with global giants. People are shown interest, and the expression of interest followed by RFP. I think the whole process is going pretty seriously and vigorously. So those are all the good things that are happening. But I also would say that there are short-term solutions possible. There may be short-term solutions possible. Number one, can the government step in and see whether we can quickly upgrade the capability of the SCL fab to, say, 65 or 40 nanometer technology? This may require much lesser investment than what is required for setting up a completely bottom-up, greenfield fab. That's one way to look at it. The other thing is the fab itself is not just manufacturing of the wafers. It also requires, after the wafers are fabricated, you need to have capability to assemble the device, they have to test the device, mark it, package it, what we call the ATMP, and then also the what you call the semiconductor assembly and test as an outsourced model. So there are multiple relatively low-hanging activities which this country can quickly put in place. Maybe in the next 12 to 18 months, we should have these capabilities up and running, and then a high-end fab can follow. So these are some of the solutions. We have to convert this crisis and difficulty into an opportunity and work towards finding a solution which lasts much longer than the crisis lasts.
So certainly, Mr. Krishnamurthy, the opportunity exists, and based on what you're saying, the government seems to be much more interested this time around. As a follow-up to that, do you think that the government can put in place, say, a PLI scheme to really incentivize movement and actual capital employment or deployment in this space?
Yes. Say, for example, many system manufacturing companies in India have brought in business that was elsewhere happening in the world with a lot of hard work, and they have successfully been able to manufacture the products that are getting consumed in the country today, and newer products are beginning to get manufactured. And this has not happened overnight. Last 3-5 years, multiple private industries have worked day and night to make this happen. Otherwise, it was happening somewhere in Southeast Asia, somewhere across the border, in China. And these product lines have been successfully brought into the country. So it is, and that has triggered the government's response in terms of PLI schemes, etc., for the system houses. Now, the moment we start getting into semiconductor manufacturing, it's only a matter of, it's a corollary that, the PLIs and things like that and other incentives will also happen for semiconductors also. But the challenge is, Alex, that a semiconductor fab today of any new greenfield kind of fab, if you have to create it, it's an expensive proposition. It will be not less than $5 billion minimum, for which actually the government has offered incentives as much as $1 billion, which is humongous, right? But $5 billion is the investment, and it can go as high as $15 billion in for the most modern state-of-art high-capacity fab. And then you work backwards, a return on investment capital, etc., etc. There are some challenges. So my own thinking process is that gather all the low-hanging fruits, get them implemented, and use that as a pull factor for the fabs to come in. And it might work out. And in the meantime, whatever capabilities we have in the country today, go after them and see how quickly we can upgrade them. And, again, if you take a system today, like a personal computer, maybe 10-15% of the components that are there, semiconductor components that are there, are of the highest technology, which requires the highest technologies. The others probably we will be able to manage with a lower geometry or a lower technology node, which could be within our grasp at a much lower cost, and we will be able to still bridge the gap much faster.
Thanks so much, Mr. Krishnamurthy, for taking the time. Let's hope that India can make big strides in establishing itself as part of the value chain in the semiconductor industry. Now, one of the major factors that will likely influence the semiconductor industry going forward is geopolitics. And to speak about this and give us some sense of how long the automotive industry will likely have to deal with this shortage, I'm joined by Rajiv Singh, partner and automotive leader at Deloitte. Thank you so much, Mr. Singh, for joining in. I want to start by asking you about these geopolitical issues. You have the US and China that are loggerheads. You have Taiwan that is increasingly getting caught in the midst of this whole tension in the South China Sea. Do you think that this is going to be a crucial aspect of the semiconductor picture going forward, considering that it's going to be such an important part of our lives, semiconductors, I mean?
No, I completely agree with you, Alex. I think that let's understand that semiconductors are becoming very, very strategic in nature. While most of the designs of semiconductors do come from US or maybe from some of the European countries, but they are not manufactured in US or in Europe. The biggest manufacturing hubs are here in Asia. And within Asia also, it's largely, as you rightly said, in Taiwan and to a certain extent in South Korea, where you have a large amount of manufacturing happening. But the key thing to understand is that IoT is there all around us now. And it's not just from a consumer perspective, but even if you think of very high-end, super sophisticated weapons, for example, if you think of missiles, if you think of aircrafts, it goes into everything. And that's where I think the control is shifting towards from a strategic perspective, and that's what is becoming more and more critical. So that's the reason why there is a lot of, I would say, strategic focus on semiconductors. While the design continues to come from US and Europe, the places where they are currently getting manufactured, one would want to ensure that there is a little more control, at least to a certain extent, in those manufacturing hubs. And as some of these companies who own the design also want to expand it, say if they want to expand it to other geographies, I think that you will find that those geographies where they form a natural ally with US, I think that is what it's going to follow in future as well.
Absolutely. That's an interesting perspective. I do want to ask you about the automotive sector in particular, because you specialize in the space. I'm sure that you've spoken to a lot of industry leaders already. How long do you think that this problem is going to persist for automotive companies? Will they have to change their just-in-time approach to supply chain management? Is that the solution here?
Yeah, I think before I come to maybe just-in-time or how do they procure, I think it's important to understand that, yes, this was a sector which got very badly hurt. Maybe the sector did not foresee that the recovery after the pandemic would be so fast. And that's the reason I think that they were not prepared in terms of placing the requests, because the auto industry so far had been operating on a just-in-time philosophy, which means that they did not want to build up inventory from their suppliers. And that's the reason the request used to go and supplies used to get secured in a shorter span of time. But during the pandemic, there was a sudden demand increase from other sectors, notably consumers and consumer durables and so on and so forth. And that's the reason why the auto as an overall sector fell a little shorter in terms of securing supplies from the larger manufacturing hubs. The Q1 and Q2 for them, from a calendar year perspective, which is I'm saying January to March and April to June, the two quarters gone by were not so great. I think they had significant shortfalls of about maybe 2.5 million units to an extent globally in the second quarter, and maybe first quarter was about 1.5 million passenger vehicles being short because of semiconductors. But we do believe that Q3 is going to be slightly lesser. So if the auto industry globally lost about 2.5 million units in Q2, in Q3 this number could be about closer to 2 million units. And as we progress in Q4, we believe that this could be still lower, which is an indication that somewhere the supplies are getting secured. But a complete recovery from a semiconductor is likely to be only by the first quarter of FY22, which is January to March 2022. So it's only by then. But at the same time, also the planning philosophies are changing. So it's no longer just in time, but it's placing orders now and getting deliveries maybe 12 to 15 weeks later. So I think the just-in-time is, of course, changing here to building inventories.
All right. Thanks so much, Mr. Singh, for taking the time. It's clearly something that we're going to have to contend with for a while longer, the delays in the availability of some of those electronic products as well as automobiles. But this shortage in semiconductors, as well as the tectonic shifts in geopolitics that is affecting the industry, provide India with a unique opportunity on the manufacturing front. It's clearly going to bear watching over the near to medium term. That's all we have for you in this edition of ET Now Spotlight, though. Thanks so much for watching. This is ET Now.